"I need a wife and you need shelter," the lonely cowboy proposed to the native widow. The wind moved slowly across the wide-open land, pushing dry grass into quiet waves that looked almost like the sea. The ranch sat alone at the edge of a long valley, surrounded by mountains that turned dark purple when the sun began to fall. It had once been full of noise, horses, laughter, visitors, but now it felt still and empty. The man who lived there had grown used to silence. Some days he welcomed it. Other days it felt heavier than the sky itself. He woke before sunrise, as he always did. The cold air bit at his face when he stepped outside, and he paused for a moment to breathe it in. Morning was his favorite time. There were no memories waiting for him yet, no regrets whispering in his ears, only the work ahead. He checked the fences first, walking along the wooden posts that stretched far into the distance. The land was not rich, but it was enough to keep him alive. He had built most of the ranch with his own hands, fixing what storms had broken and adding small improvements over the years. Work was easier than thinking. Work filled the quiet. People in the nearby town knew him as a man who kept to himself. They respected him but did not know him well. Some said he had once been different, more open, more hopeful. But time and loss had changed him. He did not argue with their opinions because he rarely stayed long enough to hear them. That morning felt ordinary until he noticed clouds gathering low in the sky. A winter storm was coming early. The wind shifted colder and sharper, and he knew he needed to return to the ranch house quickly. Storms in this region could turn dangerous without warning. As he rode back on horseback, something caught his eye near a dry riverbed. At first he thought it was a broken tree branch or a pile of blankets. Then the shape moved. He slowed the horse, narrowing his eyes. A woman stood there, wrapped in worn clothing that did little to protect her from the cold. She held herself upright with strength, but her steps looked tired. Behind her was a small bundle tied together with rope, likely everything she owned. He hesitated. Strangers were rare here, especially alone. She saw him and stopped walking. For a moment they simply looked at each other across the distance. Her face showed caution, not fear. And that surprised him. Most travelers looked relieved when they found another person. She looked ready to leave if she needed to. He guided his horse closer but kept enough space to avoid making her uncomfortable. "Storm is coming," he said quietly. "I know," she replied. Her voice was calm but carried exhaustion. "You have somewhere to go?" She shook her head slightly. He noticed the signs then. The careful way she stood, the tired eyes that had seen too much. She was not just traveling, she was searching for survival. The wind grew stronger, pushing cold air between them. He glanced at the sky again. There was not much time. "You won't make it far before dark," he said. "There's shelter at my ranch." Trust did not come easily to her. "I can pay with work," she said after a moment. He nodded once. "That's fine." He did not offer more explanation. He understood what it meant to accept help without feeling weak. She picked up her bundle, and he turned his horse slowly, allowing her to walk beside him rather than behind. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, only cautious. Snowflakes began to fall, small and light at first. As they reached the ranch, she paused at the gate, taking in the view. The house was simple but strong, built from wood darkened by years of weather. Smoke rose from the chimney, a sign of warmth waiting inside. He dismounted and opened the gate for her. She stepped through slowly, her eyes observing every detail. The barns, the horses, the tools neatly arranged near the wall. She was used to watching her surroundings carefully. Inside the house, warmth surrounded them. The fire crackled softly, and the smell of coffee filled the air. He offered her a chair without speaking much. She sat but remained alert, hands resting near her lap as if ready to stand again at any moment. "I'll make food," he said. She nodded, watching him quietly. He moved through the kitchen with practiced ease, preparing a simple meal. He noticed how she glanced toward the door occasionally, as though expecting someone to follow her. He did not ask questions yet. People carried stories, They were not ready to share. When he placed the food in front of her, she hesitated only a second before eating. Hunger overcame caution, and she finished quickly but politely. "Thank you," she said. "You're welcome." The storm grew louder outside, wind hitting the walls like waves against a boat. Snow began to cover the windows, turning the world beyond into a blur of white. They sat across from each other, strangers connected by circumstance. He studied her features carefully but respectfully. She carried herself with quiet strength, and despite exhaustion, there was dignity in her posture. "You can stay until the storm passes," he said finally. She met his eyes. "I won't cause trouble. I didn't think you would." The fire burned lower, and he added more wood. Shadows danced along the walls, creating a calm atmosphere that felt safer than the outside world. Hours passed with little conversation. He repaired a tool while she watched the flames, perhaps thinking of places left behind. Occasionally their eyes met, and each time the tension softened slightly. Night came quickly, and he prepared a spare room that had not been used in a long time. Dust covered the edges, but he cleaned it carefully. When he showed her the room, she stood at the doorway, surprised.
"You don't have to give me this,"
she said. "It's just a room." To him, it meant little. To her, it seemed like more. A sign of trust. She stepped inside slowly, touching the blanket with careful hands. For a moment her strong expression faded, revealing deep tiredness. "If you need anything," he said, "just ask." She nodded again. He returned to the main room, sitting near the fire long after she closed the door. He was not sure why he had offered shelter so easily. Maybe he recognized loneliness when he saw it. Maybe he was tired of hearing only his own voice in the house. Outside, the storm continued to roar, but inside the ranch felt different now. Not full, not lively, but no longer completely empty. In her room, she lay awake, listening to the wind. Trust was dangerous, she reminded herself. Yet something about the man felt steady, honest. He had not asked too many questions or tried to control her situation. He simply offered help. Both of them carried memories they had not shared yet. Both had reasons to keep their distance. But as snow covered the land and the fire warmed the house, the first fragile thread of connection formed between two people who had spent too long facing the world alone. Morning arrived slowly. Snow covered the land like a white blanket, softening every sound and hiding the rough edges of the world. The ranch looked different under winter's touch. Calmer, almost peaceful. Inside the house, the fire still glowed gently, keeping the cold away. The cowboy woke early, as usual. For a moment he forgot he was not alone anymore. Then he noticed the extra pair of boots near the door, carefully placed, but ready to move if needed. The sight felt strange, but not unwelcome. He made coffee quietly, trying not to disturb her. The simple routine steadied him. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving behind clear skies and sharp cold air. He stepped onto the porch and breathed deeply, watching his breath form clouds in front of him. When he returned inside, she stood near the window, already awake. She looked more rested than the night before, though her expression still carried caution. She had tied her hair back and adjusted her worn clothing, ready for whatever came next. "Storm ended," he said. "I saw," she replied softly. He poured coffee for both of them and placed a cup on the table. She accepted it with a small nod. "I should leave once the road's clear," she said after a moment. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he sat across from her, thinking carefully. Something about the idea of her leaving felt heavier than he expected. He told himself it was only practical concern. Winter was dangerous, and traveling alone was hard. "You don't have anywhere safe yet," he said gently. "I'll find something," she answered, though her voice carried uncertainty. He studied her face. She was proud, strong, unwilling to accept charity without reason. He respected that. "You said you could work," he said. "There's always work here." She looked at him, surprised. "I don't stay where I'm not wanted," she said quietly. "You're wanted if you choose to stay," he replied. The words hung in the air longer than he expected. He had not planned to say them that way, but they felt true. After breakfast, He went outside to check the animals. She followed without asking, pulling her coat tighter against the cold. He noticed she moved carefully but confidently, as if she understood outdoor life well. She helped without being told, carrying water, clearing snow near the barn, calming a restless horse with quiet patience. He watched her from a distance, impressed by her skill and calm presence. "You've done this before," he said when they paused. "I grew up around land," she answered simply. The work between them created a different kind of conversation, one without many words, but full of shared effort. By midday, the ranch felt less like a lonely place and more like something alive again. Inside, as they warmed themselves by the fire, silence settled between them once more. But it was no longer heavy. It felt thoughtful. He cleared his throat slightly, unsure how to begin what he wanted to say. "I've been thinking," he said. She turned toward him, waiting. "This land, it's hard to run alone. Winter gets worse every year, and you need shelter." She remained quiet, watching him carefully. "I'm not good with speeches," he admitted, "but I believe in practical solutions." She raised an eyebrow slightly, curious. "I need a wife," he said finally, his voice calm but serious. "And you need a safe place to stay." The words surprised even him when they came out loud. He did not mean them as romance or pressure, only as honesty. She stared at him, unsure whether she had heard correctly. "You are offering marriage?" she asked slowly. Yes. The room felt suddenly smaller, filled with unspoken thoughts. "Why?" she asked. "Because it makes sense," he replied. "We both gain something. You get protection, shelter, and independence. I get help on the ranch, and maybe someone to share the quiet with." She looked away, absorbing his words. Her expression showed a mix of disbelief and reflection. "I don't want pity," she said firmly. "It's not pity," he answered. "It's partnership." She walked toward the window, staring at the endless white fields outside. Snow reflected sunlight so brightly that it almost hurt to look at. "My life has not been easy," she said after a long pause. "I don't trust promises easily. I understand. Marriage is not a small thing." "I know." He did not try to convince her quickly. He simply waited. She turned back toward him, studying his face as if searching for hidden motives. But she saw only honesty and uncertainty. A man who was not used to speaking about feelings, but who meant what he said. "I lost my husband," she said quietly. "And after that everything changed." He nodded slowly, not asking for more details. "I don't want to belong to someone again," she continued. "You wouldn't belong to me," he said. "You'd stand beside me." Her eyes softened slightly at that. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying fine snow across the ground. The world felt distant from the warmth of the room. "What if it doesn't work?" she asked. "Then we find another way," he answered simply. She almost smiled at the honesty of that response. Days passed as she considered his proposal. They continued working together, learning each other's habits and rhythms. She noticed how he treated animals gently, how he repaired broken tools instead of throwing them away, how he respected silence. He noticed how she brought small changes into the house, rearranging items to make them more practical, cooking meals with quiet care, humming softly when she thought no one was listening. The town nearby eventually heard about her presence. When they went to buy supplies, curious looks followed them. Some people whispered, but neither of them responded. They walked side by side, equal in presence. One evening after a long day of work, they sat outside watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. "You haven't asked again," she said. "I told you once," he replied. "The choice is yours." She took a deep breath. "I came here with nothing," she said. "No home, no plan. I thought I would keep moving until I disappear. But here, I feel something different." She paused, searching for the right words. "Safety," she said finally. He felt warmth in his chest but kept his expression calm. "I'm still afraid," she admitted. So am I, he said softly. They shared a small laugh at that. The silence that followed felt peaceful rather than uncertain. I will think more, she said. That's enough, he replied. As darkness settled over the land, both understood that the proposal had changed something between them. It was no longer just about survival. It was about possibility, a future neither had expected to find again. The days grew longer as winter slowly loosened its hold on the land. Snow still covered parts of the valley, but patches of earth began to show through, dark and alive beneath the melting ice. Life at the ranch settled into a steady rhythm, shaped by shared work and quiet understanding. She stayed. She had not given a dramatic answer to his proposal. One evening, after a long day of repairing fences, she simply sat across from him at the table and said, "If we do this, it must be equal. No ownership, no control." He nodded immediately.
Equal, he agreed, and that was enough.
The marriage itself was simple. A short visit to town, a few witnesses, and quiet words spoken without grand ceremony. Some people watched with curiosity, others with silent judgment, but neither of them focused on the crowd. For both, the moment felt less like a romantic promise and more like a practical step toward building stability. Returning to the ranch afterward felt different. The house no longer belonged to only one person. Every small detail began to change. At first, living together as husband and wife felt awkward. They were still learning how to share space, habits, and emotions. He woke early and moved quietly, used to being alone. She adjusted slowly, learning his routines while keeping her own ways. One morning he found her rearranging the kitchen. "I hope you don't mind," she said, noticing his surprised expression. "It's fine," he replied. "Just different." She smiled slightly. Different can be good. He realized she was right. The house felt warmer now, not just from the fire, but from her presence. She added small touches, a woven cloth on the table, herbs drying near the window, the soft sound of humming as she worked. The ranch itself began to change too. She approached tasks with new ideas, suggesting ways to improve water storage and protect crops from harsh weather. At first, he felt unsure about changing systems he had used for years, but he listened. Slowly, he saw that her ideas made life easier. Trust grew through shared effort rather than spoken promises. Still, misunderstandings appeared. One afternoon, he tried to help her carry a heavy bucket, taking it from her without asking. She stiffened immediately. "I can do it," she said firmly.
I know,
He replied, confused.
I was just helping.
She took a breath, calming herself.
I need to feel capable, she explained. I have been treated like someone weak before.
From that moment, he asked before stepping in, learning to offer support without taking away her independence. In return, she learned to understand his quiet nature. Sometimes he needed space to think, long walks alone across the land where he could breathe without speaking. At first she worried she had done something wrong, but he explained gently. "Silence is where I find balance," he said. After that, she respected those moments, using them as time to focus on her own thoughts. Evenings became their favorite time. They sat near the fire, sharing stories slowly, revealing pieces of their past, like pages of a book turned one at a time. She spoke of her late husband with respect and sadness, not hiding the pain, but also not letting it define her completely. He listened without jealousy, understanding that love did not disappear simply because life moved forward. He shared stories of loss, too, of dreams that had faded and years spent trying to forget loneliness through work. Speaking these memories aloud felt strange, but freeing. Outside, the community watched their growing partnership with mixed reactions. Some neighbors were kind, offering quiet support. Others whispered behind their backs, questioning whether their marriage could truly work. One day in town, a stranger made a careless comment that she overheard. She said nothing, but he saw the hurt in her eyes. "You don't have to come here if you don't want to," he said later. "I won't hide," she replied calmly. "People can think what they want. We know who we are." Her strength inspired him. He realized she faced challenges not only as a widow but as someone who refused to let others define her worth. As spring approached, the ranch demanded more work. Together they planted seeds, repaired damaged structures, and prepared for new life. The physical effort brought them closer. They laughed more often now, sharing small jokes and teasing each other gently. One evening as they watched the sunset, he noticed how naturally she fit into the landscape. The ranch no longer looked lonely. It felt alive. "You changed this place," he said quietly. She shook her head. "We changed it." That word, "we," stayed with him long after the conversation ended. Despite growing closeness, fear still lingered beneath the surface. Both worried about losing what they were building. Sometimes she hesitated before speaking about the future, unsure if stability could truly last. Sometimes he struggled to express feelings he had kept hidden for years, but instead of pulling away, they learned to talk through discomfort. One rainy afternoon, when work outside was impossible, they sat together, repairing tools. Silence filled the room, but it felt peaceful. "Do you regret it?" she asked suddenly. "Regret what?" He looked at her carefully. "No," he said firmly. "Do you?" She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No." Relief spread quietly between them. Over time, the line between practical partnership and genuine affection blurred. Small gestures revealed deeper care, leaving warm tea for each other, sharing blankets during cold nights, exchanging quiet smiles across the room. The ranch became more than a place of survival. It became a home shaped by two people learning to trust again. One evening, as stars filled the sky, they stood outside watching the horizon. He realized something had changed inside him. The loneliness that once felt endless had softened, replaced by a calm sense of belonging. She felt it too, a feeling of safety that did not take away her independence but strengthened it. Neither of them said the word love yet. It felt too large, too fragile to speak aloud. But it lived quietly in their actions, growing stronger each day. And as the seasons turned, they understood that their marriage was no longer just an agreement made for survival. It had become a journey of learning, healing, and building something real together. Step by step, moment by moment, stronger than either had imagined possible. Spring arrived slowly but surely, bringing warmth back into the land. Snow melted into clear streams that ran through the valley, and green shoots pushed through the soil with quiet determination. The ranch felt alive in a way it had not for many years. Birds returned, animals grew more active, and the air carried the promise of change. Life between them had grown steady and calm. Their routines blended naturally now, shaped by shared work and growing trust. Mornings began with quiet conversations over coffee. Days were filled with teamwork, repairing old structures and preparing new plans for the future. Evenings often ended with soft laughter or thoughtful silence near the fire. But peace does not mean the absence of challenges. Slowly, small tensions began to rise, not because of anger, but because deeper feelings were starting to surface. One afternoon, while they worked near the fence line, a rider approached from the distance. The horse moved quickly, sending dust into the air. Both noticed at the same time. The visitor was a man she recognized. Her body stiffened, and the change did not escape the cowboy's attention. The rider stopped near them, dismounting slowly. He greeted her first, speaking her name gently, but with familiarity that made the cowboy feel suddenly like an outsider in his own land. "I didn't know where you had gone," the visitor said. "People said you disappeared." "I chose a new path," she replied calmly. The man glanced toward the cowboy. Curiosity and concern mixed in his eyes. "This is my husband," she said, her voice steady. The word husband sounded strong, but the moment felt heavy. The visitor nodded politely, though tension lingered beneath the surface. He explained that he had known her from before, from a time when her life had been very different. He brought news from people she once lived among, updates about friends, stories about change, reminders of a past she had tried to leave behind. After he left, silence settled between her and the cowboy as they returned to work. "You never told me about him," he said finally. I didn't think it mattered, she answered, though her voice held uncertainty. He nodded, but something inside him felt unsettled. It was not jealousy exactly, but a sudden awareness that parts of her life existed beyond what he knew. That evening, the mood between them felt different. Conversations were shorter, movements more careful. Neither wanted conflict, but both felt the distance growing. She sensed his quiet withdrawal and approached him later near the barn. You're thinking too much, she said gently. Maybe, he admitted. You don't need to compare yourself to anyone from my past. I'm not comparing, he replied. I just realized how much I still don't know. She paused, considering his words. Trust takes time. We are still learning each other. He nodded, though the feeling of uncertainty did not fully leave. Over the next few days, small disagreements appeared. Nothing serious, but enough to create tension. Decisions about the ranch that once felt easy now required more discussion. They both cared deeply about the future, and that made every choice feel more important. One morning, while planning repairs, their opinions clashed. This way has always worked, he said. But it could work better, she replied calmly. Neither raised their voice, yet frustration grew quietly between them. For the first time, the partnership felt fragile. Later that day, he walked alone across the hills, trying to clear his thoughts. The wide-open land usually brought him peace, but now it only reminded him how much he feared losing what they had built together. Back at the ranch, she sat near the window, reflecting on her own feelings. She realized that the marriage had started as a practical agreement, but somewhere along the way, it had become more. That change made everything feel more vulnerable. When he returned, the sun was setting, painting the sky in warm colors. She waited outside, arms crossed lightly against the cool evening air. We need to talk, she said gently. He nodded. They sat on the porch together, watching the horizon. I am afraid, she admitted quietly. Of what? Of depending too much on someone. He listened carefully. And you? She asked. I'm afraid this isn't enough for you, he said honestly. That one day you'll realize you need something different. She turned toward him, surprised. I chose to stay, she said firmly. Every day I choose it again. The words eased something inside him. I never wanted this to feel like an obligation, he said. It doesn't, she replied. But we must choose each other freely, not just because it makes sense. They sat quietly, letting the truth of that statement settle between them. Days later, another challenge appeared. Financial pressure grew when unexpected repairs were needed for the barn. The cost felt heavy, and stress returned. For a moment, both wondered if their decision to join lives had created more difficulty instead of less. Yet instead of pulling apart, they began working through problems together more intentionally. They discussed plans late into the night, balancing ideas and finding compromise. One evening, while fixing a broken gate together, he paused and looked at her. When I asked you to marry me, he said, I thought it would solve practical problems. I didn't expect to care this much. She smiled softly. Caring is not a problem. No, he agreed, but it makes everything more important. She understood. Loving someone, even quietly, meant facing the possibility of loss again. As weeks passed, the tension faded slowly, replaced by deeper understanding. They learned that partnership was not just about sharing easy moments, but also about facing uncertainty together. One night during a strong storm, they stood inside watching rain hit the windows. Without thinking, he reached for her hand. She did not pull away. In that simple gesture, both felt something shift. Their marriage was no longer only an agreement or a safe arrangement. It had become a choice renewed daily, a bond strengthened by honesty, conflict, and the courage to stay even when things felt uncertain. Outside, the storm moved across the land, leaving the air fresh and clear. Inside, they sat close together, understanding that true connection was not about perfection, but about standing side by side through every season, even the difficult ones. And as the rain slowed and quiet returned, they realized that the challenges they had faced had not broken them. Instead, they had shown what their partnership was truly made of: respect, patience, and the growing realization that what began as survival had turned into something deeply real. Summer arrived with warm light that stretched across the land from early morning until late evening. The valley felt alive again, full of color and movement. Wildflowers grew along the hills, and the ranch stood strong under clear blue skies. The seasons had changed many things, but the greatest change had happened quietly inside the two people who now shared this life together. The challenges they faced during spring had left behind lessons that neither of them would forget. They had learned how to speak honestly, how to listen without judgment, and how to stand together even when doubts appeared. Now their partnership felt stronger, more balanced. He noticed the difference in himself first. The loneliness that once followed him like a shadow had faded. He still enjoyed silence, still valued quiet mornings and long walks across the fields. But now the silence felt peaceful instead of empty. Knowing someone waited for him at home changed everything. She noticed changes too. The fear that she might lose her independence had slowly disappeared. Instead of feeling trapped, she felt supported. The ranch had become a place where she could grow without losing who she was. She worked beside him as an equal, sharing decisions and shaping the future together. One morning they rode out to check distant fences. The sun rose slowly behind them, casting golden light across the land. As they traveled side by side, he glanced toward her and smiled without thinking. "What?" she asked, noticing his expression. "Nothing," he said, though his voice carried warmth. "Just, this feels right." She nodded softly, understanding exactly what he meant. The ranch continued to improve. Together they planted new crops, repaired aging buildings, and created systems that made life easier. Their teamwork felt natural now, like two people moving in the same rhythm without needing many words. Neighbors began to notice the change too. The ranch that once seemed quiet and forgotten now felt welcoming. People stopped by more often, sometimes bringing supplies or sharing news. Slowly, the whispers and doubts faded, replaced by respect. One afternoon, a family from town visited with a small gift: fresh bread wrapped carefully in cloth. They spoke kindly, complimenting the progress of the ranch. As the visitors left, she looked at him with surprise. "They see us differently now," she said. "They see what we built," he replied. That evening they sat outside watching the sunset. The sky turned shades of orange and red, reflecting softly in her eyes. "Do you remember the day we met?" she asked. "Of course," he said. "You looked ready to walk away at any moment." She laughed quietly. "I was. And now?" She thought for a moment before answering. "Now I stay because I want to," she said. The words carried deep meaning. Their relationship had grown far beyond the original agreement. It was no longer about survival or practicality. It was about choice. Daily, steady choice. As summer continued, they faced smaller challenges together: repairing equipment that broke unexpectedly, handling sudden weather changes, managing the constant demands of ranch life. But instead of feeling overwhelmed, they approached each problem as a team. One night, during a local gathering in town, they danced together for the first time. The music was simple and the steps were slow, but the moment felt important. He felt slightly awkward at first, unsure of himself, but she guided him gently, smiling. "You're learning," she teased softly. "Only because you're patient," he replied. The laughter they shared that night stayed with them long after they returned home. As weeks passed, deeper conversations began to happen naturally. They spoke about dreams for the future, expanding the ranch, helping travelers in need, creating a place that offered safety to others who felt lost. "I want this land to mean something," she said one evening. "It already does," he replied. "Yes," she agreed. "But we can make it more." Her vision inspired him. Together, they started planning ways to improve the ranch not just for themselves, but for others as well. It gave their work new purpose. One quiet afternoon, while repairing a fence near the edge of the property, he paused and looked out across the land. The view felt different now, fuller, warmer. "I never thought I would feel this again," he said quietly. What feeling? She asked.
Hope. She walked closer, standing beside him. Neither spoke for a moment, letting the silence carry meaning.
Later that evening, as stars filled the sky, he finally said words he had been holding back for months. When I asked you to marry me, I thought it was only practical, he admitted. But somewhere along the way, it became more.
She looked at him gently. I know,
she said softly. I care about you deeply, he continued. Not just as a partner on this land, but as the person who made this place feel alive again. Her eyes softened, and she reached for his hand. I feel the same, she said simply. The moment felt calm and honest without dramatic emotion. Just quiet truth shared between two people who had learned to trust slowly. Their story did not end with grand celebration or sudden change. Instead, it moved forward steadily, shaped by daily choices and small acts of care. They continued working side by side, building a life that felt strong because it was built on respect and patience. Autumn eventually approached, bringing cooler air and golden leaves. The ranch stood as a symbol of what they had created together. Not perfect, but real and lasting. Neighbors sometimes spoke about their story as something special, but to them, it felt simple. Two lonely paths had crossed during a storm, and instead of moving apart again, they chose to walk forward together.